Hi class, in this video I'm going to show you how to use Pythagorean theorem to solve for one of the shorter sides of a right angle triangle. So in this example here, I first want to identify what's my longest side. So I look for my right angle and then I simply draw an arrow right across from my right angle. In this case, my longest side is 17, so it means I have my longest side. And A, if this is A, then this must be B, right? And then the longest side is C. It means I have C and I have B, so I'm looking for A. In this case, if you have the longest side and you're looking for one of your shorter sides, here's what you would do. First things first, let's write out our Pythagorean theorem. We have A squared plus B squared equals to C squared. Okay, now we don't know what A is, so I'm just simply going to leave A squared as A squared. I know what B is. B is 15, so I'm going to replace B squared with 15 squared. Now, I also know what C is. C squared is going to be 17 squared instead because C equals to 17. Now, what I do from here is, let's just compute what 15 squared is first. 15 squared is 225. And then 17 squared is 289. Now, from here, I'm simply going to subtract 225 from both sides of my equal sign. So what I do to one side, on one side of the equal sign, I must do to the other. So if I subtracted negative 225 on the left side, I must do it to the right side. In this case, positive 225 minus 225 is simply going to be 0. So all I'm left with on this side is a squared. Now, in this case, 289 minus 225 is simply going to be 64. So in this case, now I have a squared equals to 64. So remember what we did before. If I just want to find a and not a squared, I simply have to take my a squared and take the square root of it. But what I do to one side, I must do to the other as well. So I must also take the square root of 64. So now in this case, a squared being square rooted is just a, and the square root of 64 is simply 8. So my answer for a should be 8 centimeters. Now, let's talk about some shortcuts. Some shortcuts to finding this is whether you're looking for A or you're looking for B, you always basically can use this formula. If you're looking for A, you basically take the square root of C squared minus B squared. Or if you're looking for B, you can take the square root of C squared minus A squared. In this case, we're looking for A. So I would just write A equals to, and we know what C squared is. C is 17, so instead of C squared, I have 17 squared. B in this case is 15, so instead of B squared, I'm just going to write 15 squared. And if I had a calculator, I can just compute this right away. But if not, I'm just going to break it down into steps, okay? So in this case, 17 squared is basically 17 times 17 is going to be 289. And then 15 squared is just 15 times 15. That's just going to be 225. Now I have the square root of 289 minus 225. 289 minus 225 is going to be 64. So I have the square root of 64. And the square root of 64 is simply going to be 8. So in this case, A would still equal to 8 centimeters. But, however, some students find this method a lot easier as a shortcut because they don't have to do the subtraction from one side to the other using algebra. Now, in this case, I have a different example. Example 2, I'm given a, well, first let's identify the longest side. So I have to circle my right angle. And after I circle my right angle, directly across from it is always my longest side. Now, so my longest side is 10, and the longest side is always C. In this case, I don't know what B is, but I know that 6 is going to be A. So if I were to use my shortcut, in this case, I don't know what B is, but I know what A and C is. I'm going to use B equals to the square root of C squared minus A squared. So in this case, B equals to the square root of C squared. In this case, C is going to be 10. So I have 10 squared minus, now A is 6. So instead of A squared, it's going to be 6 squared. So I have the square root of 10 squared minus 6 squared. 10 squared is just 10 times 10. So that's going to be 100. 6 squared is 6 times 6, so that's going to be 36. So I have 100 minus 36. And 100 minus 36 is going to be 64. So in this case, the square root of 64 is simply going to be 8. So my final answer for B is 8 centimeters. So once again, it doesn't matter. Like, let's say I didn't name this B. I just named this A. In this case, then 6 would be B. I'm still solving for another missing side. So in this case, if I made this vice versa, B would be here and A would just be 8 centimeters. It doesn't matter what you label as A or B. The only thing that matters is C, which is always the longest side. Let's go over some practice here. So let's say I want to find the length of the shorter side A or B in the triangle above. So in this case, it doesn't matter if I label this B or if I label this A, right? It really doesn't matter. In this case, it's already labeled as B, so I'm just going to keep it as B, okay? I want to find my right angle and draw a arrow across from it. That would always be my longest side, so that's C. In this case, this other side here, the only letter I'm missing is A, so I'm going to let 9 be A. So in this case, let's solve for this. If I'm looking for B, the shortcut method is B equals to C squared minus A squared. But you can easily see if instead of looking for B, if I was just looking for A, I would write C squared minus B squared. Okay, in this case, let's find out what B is. So instead of C squared, I'm going to write 15 squared because C is 15. Now, instead of writing A, since A equals to 9, I'm going to write 9 squared. So I have 15 squared minus 9 squared. 15 squared is just 15 times 15. That's going to be 225. All right. Now, 9 squared is just going to be 81. Okay, great. So now I have 225 minus 81. In this case, 225 minus 81 is simply going to be 144. And the square root of 144, think of two numbers that can multiply together to get to 144. In this case, those two numbers are 12. So the square root of 144 is going to be 12. Hence, B would equal to 12 centimeters. Okay, let's do another example. Let's do example 2. In this case, for example 2, notice how A is my missing side now. I could have easily labeled this as B. First step, let's find the right angle and circle it. Now I want to draw a line across my right angle. And whatever is across my right angle is always my longest side, so that side is C. In this case, since A is labeled and my longest side is C, that means I'm going to label 8 centimeters as B. So to use the shortcut method to find A would equal to C squared minus B squared. And in this case, C is going to be 14. So I have 14 here squared, and B is going to be 8. So I have, instead of writing B squared, I'm going to write 8 squared. So I have the square root of 14 squared minus 8 squared. Now, the square root of 14, no, sorry, my bad. 14 squared is going to be 196. And then 8 squared is going to be 64, right? So now I'm going to take 196 and subtract it from 64, which in this case, I would actually get the square root of 132. Now, the square root of 132 is not a very nice number, but if I were to use a calculator or to use one of the estimation techniques we learned, we can estimate it to the nearest tenth. So in this case, I'm actually just going to use a calculator, and I'm going to get the answer to be 11.48912 ... It just keeps going on forever. And if I were to round it to the nearest tenth as an answer, I would simply say A equals to 11.5 because the 4 is my tenths place and the 8 is 5 or greater, so it rounds it up to 11.5, and then everything else after that becomes a 0. So my final answer for A would be 11.5 centimeters. And hopefully this gives you an idea of how to find the side of a right angle triangle when I already know my longest side.